learned how to do that bigger picture, how to be more creative, and how to really look closely and deeply and analyze what they're reading. And so hopefully we're going to be seeing a change as we work through this. But that literacy instruction, I told you, is embedded in classrooms all across the curriculum. These are the exemplar texts. Now, people have said, well, it mandates that you need to teach these. No. When they say these are exemplar texts, and they're listed in the Common Core, and they're also listed in the Iowa Core. And you can see these, I have some resources that you can use, and I have them on here, and I'm going to leave my PowerPoint. This is a print off of my PowerPoint. I'll leave it here, and there is a list of all sorts of resources you can go to. I mean, just for your own curiosity, check it out. Please do. But here, look at this. Who would have anything against Casey at the Bat, The Black Stallion, Little Women, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Roll Up Thunder, Hear My Cry, Letter on Thomas Jefferson by John Adams, Gettysburg Address, Letter from Birmingham Jail, Fahrenheit 451, Grapes of Wrath, Jane Eyre, A Raisin in the Sun. Those are just a few of the exemplar texts. And what exemplar means is when we go to teach a story, let's make sure that in some way it is as complex as these. These are examples to aspire to use. And so that was a struggle for our 8th grade and the Rochelle, who I work with, to look closely at what we were doing, and we're like, this isn't complex enough for our kids. We need to challenge them more. And so we would try to find more. So what we did was we ended up doing The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe in 8th grade, which we wouldn't have done until high school before. But we're like, no, our kids are ready for this. They need to, and you need and try to do some short stories that are so complex that you have to read it. The big thing is once and done is not in our class for this. We are going to read it over and over again. The first time you read it, you're just going to try to analyze what the theme is. The second time you read it, you're going to say, look closely at the words, and why do you think that author selected those words? The third time you read it, you're going to analyze it even more. What impact did this word choice have on your thinking? And so you have to have some complex text to be able to do that. I mean, like the Wimpy Boy books, they do not cut it. If you want to use complex text, they just don't cut it. And so you really have to, we still have reading for fun embedded into what we do, and you can have choice about what you want to read at that time. But when we are learning reading skills, literacy skills, we have more complex things that we do. So the Iowa Core Standards recommend that in elementary you spend 50% of your time on literature and 50% of your time on informational text. In high school, they change it, it's 30% literature, 70% informational text. Now, what this means, and people have complained about this, they're like, oh, that means an English teacher she's going to have to find informational text to teach. No. What this means is they are looking at the entire day that a kid goes through school. And so in science and in social studies and industrial tech, you have informational text. They are looking at the amount of reading, and they're giving it as much value as what you're doing in your ELA class with your literature. And so it doesn't mean that you're supposed to cut down in ELA on the literature that you're doing. It just means that we are being accountable for what the informational text that you're reading in your other subjects too. That's all part of the reading day for that child. And so that's what that means, and I know people have complained about this before. But we know that students of the 21st century, collaborating, creating, critical thinking, contributing, conversing, and connecting are all things that we need to do. So maybe you've been into some classrooms where you see they're organized in tables now, that they're not the straight rows, that they're in pods, and that they're working together, and it's a lot noisier. There's a lot more conversation going on, because we know that for our kids to be prepared for when they get out of school, they need to be able to collaborate. They need to be able to problem solve together. And another thing that we do, and I'll talk to you in a little bit about this, is just the way we teach. But game changer number 4 is the coaching. And you know what a coach values by what is repeated over and over. And so this is what you'll find in those standards. And those standards begin at kindergarten, they spiral all the way up through 12th grade. And so you will see over and over, they will say close, attentive reading. They will say critical reading, reasoning and use of evidence, comprehend, evaluate, synthesize, cite specific evidence, evaluate other points of view critically, demonstrate understanding of the text, referring explicitly to the text, refer to details and examples, determine, describe, explain, compare and contrast, and analyze. Over and over, beginning in kindergarten, all the way up through 12th grade. You're going going to see something similar to that repeated, but the complexity is added year by year for our students to be pushed to be those critical readers and thinkers that we expect them to be in the 21st century. So, the other thing they talk a lot about is proficiency, complexity, and independence, because we want to assure students that graduate from high school are able to do quick, on-the-run research when needed. So there's a lot of emphasis on doing research and citing textual evidence to go along with it. Express their thinking verbally and in writing. Summarize, synthesize, analyze, and design without needing teachers to insert all the key questions. That was one thing we learned, which was a real eye-opener for me is, we used to pre-teach a story so much that the kid didn't even have to read it. Because we already told them everything about it. We provided all this background information. And they said, we need to move away from that. We need to allow kids an opportunity to struggle with the text. To give them that text and say, okay, I want you to read it, and then we're going to talk about it. But that's really hard for a teacher because we like to talk. And we like to explain things, and we like to give this background information. And you do need to do some background information, but maybe not as much as we have been doing. And the other thing is application of what is learned is key. How are you going to apply what you're learning? And so when I look at a standard, I look at it closely, and then I think, okay, what materials, what things can I pull together so that they're able to master this standard? And then how do they apply it to a project? Or how do they apply it in their life? Making it real, making it relevant, and making it authentic for our students. What shifts have I seen? There's a focus from teaching to learning. That was huge. My focus had always been my literature book and my grammar book. My focus now is, who do I expect them to learn first? Then, what materials do I pull in? A gradual release of responsibility. That GRR, they call it. And so we model, and then we work together as a group on it. And then you work with a partner, and then you do it independently. That is a gradual release of what I expect you to do. Now, I don't know about you, but previously, I teach you do it, I teach you do it. Now it's a gradual release, where we're asking you, let's solve this together, solve it with a partner. So that's why we need to be in groups and working and solving things together. And then you do it independently, because then you're assured that you understand it. So the questions are answered. Increased rigor and accountability, a search to create units that are complex with higher level text, incorporation of collaborative conversations. This is a huge one for us. We have little fans that are kids, and it's got like stories, sentence starters on it. So it says, like you say your opinion, and then I'll say, I hear what you're saying. I agree with you because of this, or I disagree with you because of this. So teaching kids to respectfully disagree with one another, I mean, goodness, just look at TV, and you know that doesn't happen. And we need to be teaching our kids that they need to be respectful of each other's ideas. Closely examine the credibility of sources. My goodness, go to MSNBC and go to Fox and go to ABC and look at how each thing is reported differently and how they choose different words to help skew how you're thinking. And so just looking at examining the credibility of sources. Is that a credible source? Where did you get it from? Is it a blog? A blog's an opinion. Because some kids think just because it's on the internet, it's true. It's printed. Look at this. Look who printed it. Who made that source? Where'd that source come from? And then I love this one, is analyzing word choice to persuade the reader. Doesn't that happen all the time? They're picking these words that make us have to think one way or the other, and it's really important for us to become aware that they're doing that they're manipulating us through those word choices. So I'm going to just give you a few examples of how it changed my teaching. And so one thing would be, this is the story. We read a story in our literature book about Iqbal Masih. Iqbal Masih, at the age of 4, was sold into slavery, into the sweatshops of Pakistan, because his fingers were small enough that he could weave the rugs. Okay? And so Iqbal hears that he doesn't have to do this. So as he gets a little bit older, he begins to speak out against being in the sweatshops. And eventually, at the age of 12, he's assassinated. We read that story, and typically we answer questions about it. Read and answer questions. Well, Iowa Core says we need to analyze word choice. So we found the same story printed by another group, and there was a group from Canada about Iqbal Masih. And so we looked and we said, well, why does our literature book tell it in this way? Why do you think the Canadian group tells it in this way. Why do you think this author chose those words to describe it? Why do you think this author chose those words? So it's that analysis, taking it much deeper than we ever would have thought. And then the third thing we do with that is, I told them, I go, do you know that there's a YouTube video put out by the Pakistani government that says the whole thing's a lie? That Iqbal Masih wasn't assassinated, that they just made it up? And so we watched that video, and then they have to decide, why would the Pakistani government put something like that out, saying that the whole thing's a lie? And so it just takes it to a much deeper level than I ever would have thought to take it before, as we're looking and we're analyzing. The other thing we do is, this is Malala, and Malala, was shot because she stood up for women being able to learn, and Nobel Peace Prize winner. And so we watch several videos about Malala, and we read stories about Malala, and then we come up with a list of what inferences can we make about the character of Malala. Well, she was willing to sacrifice for what she believed in. She was very devoted to women's rights. And so we come up with all these inferences. But that's not where we stop. Then we say, all right, cite textual evidence that supports that inference. Where did you get that idea that she stands up for women's rights? So it's the analysis that's the focus. And it's so important to get kids to analyze and to think. So making inferences, citing textual evidence, examining word choice, author intent, and then determining, are those credible sources? What do they have to win or lose by reporting it in a certain way? And I'm talking from the 8th grade perspective. You might not do that so much in 2nd grade, but from the 8th grade perspective, we do that. And then finally, the 5th game changer is the team in a basketball game. And so with the team, we have professional learning communities where we get together and we plan and work, and we see who's learning and who isn't. This is where we differentiate, and we work with kids who have special needs, and we figure out, okay, so this standard, when we want them to cite textual evidence, what would that look like for a special needs student? What would that look like for an ELL student? And so you differentiate, but always a focus on how do you use the information that you're gathering. We have the Iowa Teacher Leadership and Compensation Grants that some districts have been fortunate enough to get, where there are instructional coaches coming in and helping with this process of implementing Iowa Core. We have multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS, and those are like little remediation times or enrichment times for kids who've got it. How do we push them further? And then how do we help the kids who are struggling? And how can we make this relevant to them? We have AEA support personnel. We have school improvement advisory councils, and I would like to advise you, women, to call your schools and say, I would like to serve on the School Improvement Advisory Council, because we're required, every school district is required to have one, and they're looking for community members to be a part of that. And that's where you talk about the testing, and where you talk about the curriculum. So become involved, and maybe you might even have like advisory councils for your buildings. But if you're interested, you really should serve to see what's going on and what we're doing in our schools. And then, of course, we have the Iowa Department of Education website. And I showed you the Iowa Department of Ed. You can go there. There's a big section on Iowa Core where it has all of the standards listed. It's got lesson plans, ideas on how you can make those standards come alive. And they have all sorts of, there's all sorts of instructional videotapes out there on YouTube. And, just a lot of resources out there for you to explore. But some things remain constant. And Rita Pearson, she's an educator, and she says that every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection, and insists that they become the best they can possibly be. And that's what we do. And that's what you do as parents. That's what you do as teachers. And that's what you do as you volunteer in schools. You become a champion for kids because they need champions. They need a living, breathing champion that talks to them, that shows that you care about them, and that you care that they matter. And so I was just going to read to you, this is going to be my conclusion, and that is that one of the things that I love to do in 8th grade is at the end of the year, I ask the kids to write a letter reflecting what the 8th grade year was like for them. And so if you do this, especially with middle school kids, be ready, because some of them are painfully honest about what they did or did not learn in your classroom. But last spring, I got this letter, and it said, at first I wasn't much in favor of school. As the year progressed, though, I realized Still learning how to be optimistic and creative. I'll miss the times of Cocoa House when we all shared our ideas through writing. What I'll miss most, though, is literacy. I have improved greatly on citing evidence and composing well-written papers. Without your help, Mrs. Schmidt, I would have never become the great writer I am today. I'm glad you thought I was a great writer. As I reach my summer break, even when I'm having fun, I will remember the person who always taught us to look at the good things in life. Great teachers may win awards, but what makes them truly great is the people they inspire. And that's what you do. You have that ability to inspire your own children. You have your ability to inspire your grandchildren. You have your ability to inspire many people in your life who are with you all the time. And that's so important for us all to work together. So I will entertain any questions that you might have about yes.
I love the idea of focusing more on critical thinking. But is there a guide how you're balance with doing this new stuff yet still getting the basics, 2 plus 2, and what is the noun and all those things?
Yeah,
how does that work in the classroom?
if you look at the standards, it's still in there. Nouns, verbs, adverbs, all of that is still in there. And in fact, we in Makokada, we decided we really needed something, so we did buy a reading program that is core-aligned. And the most interesting part is to go to kindergarten and talk to the kindergarten teachers. Their eyes just are bugging out. They're like, oh my gosh, we never would have expected this of our kids. So they're doing it. And they're learning. I'm walking in kindergarten, I'm walking in first grade, second grade. They're learning about nouns and verbs, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got 8th graders who don't know nouns and verbs. So I'm really happy. But yeah, it's accountable. It's in there. It really is. You have to unpack those standards and look closely at them. Yeah, 2 plus 2 is still 4, and yes, we do still memorize the facts, and that's local control once again. What the curriculum is that they're
Something parents do with children come home totally frustrated and you don't know how to work that.
I hope that
You get tally marks and interesting things
yeah.
from 3rd graders, and you're like, really? Tally marks still?
So what are the? You mean that
Frustrated with
math?
frustrated, with reading, done reading, no more reading. What can a parent do? What's your suggestion? Other than get on, the curriculum team, or?
Yeah, I would for math. That's what I hear the most complain about is math, and like parents not understanding how they can help their child with the math. There are all sorts of resources, and I'm going to leave a list, and so you can look at some of those places. I go in and talk to teachers. Sorry, I'm going to have your